We were told to be quiet, to be grateful, to be strong. But strength isn't silence, and healing doesn't happen in the dark. We are the mothers, the survivors, the women who carry stories that don't fit into small talk. We are the ones who've buried dreams, rebuilt ourselves, and still show up for the ones who need us. We've learned that grief has layers, that motherhood has shadows, and that love demands truth. This is our space to speak it, to name what hurts, to hold what still aches, and to find the beauty that keeps growing anyway. We don't whisper here. We breathe. We break. We rebuild. Together. Because silence never saved us. But sisterhood, storytelling, and the courage to be seen, that just might. Those are the words I wrote for the Silent Mother Project. But what I didn't realize then was that I wrote them for me too. For the girl who was told to stay small. For the women who thought she had to earn her worth. For the mother who believed she had to keep her pain separate from her purpose. But I'm done splitting myself in two. This season is about merging it all. Because I am the silent mother. I am the voice that once stayed quiet to be taken seriously. I am the woman learning that I was always enough, even when I was too much for others. I am the mother who lives with CPTSD, who's still learning what that means, who sometimes parents through fear, and who is still healing out loud. If you're listening, maybe you are too. Welcome to Living Richardson, Life Unmuted, a Silent Mother Project production. I'm your host, Sam Richardson, and this season I'm done shrinking myself to fit what professional looks like. I am bringing every part of me, the mother, the survivor, the advocate, the woman still figuring it out, because I am all of those things. And that's what makes me powerful. We'll talk about grief, growth, and the messy middle where the healing actually happens. I'm not here to be quiet. I am here to live out loud. And I hope you will too. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. That's one of my favorite quotes by William Shakespeare. For most of my life, I believed that. I thought if life was a stage, then my job was to play my part as I was directed to do. Be polite, be pretty, be professional, smile through it. Don't make people uncomfortable. And the audience loved it, because it's easy to applaud a woman who keeps it together, not one who tells you she's falling apart. What they don't tell you about performing is that eventually you forget who you are when the curtain drops. I got so good at pretending that I almost convinced myself. Almost. But the truth has a way of slipping out. Through your body, through your dreams, through the moments your mask starts to crack. That's when I realized I don't want to be a player anymore. I want to be the writer of my story, of my healing, of what comes next. I was raised to believe that being different meant being wrong. From the beginning, there was always this invisible checklist for how to live a good life. You were supposed to color inside the lines, speak softly, smile often, say thank you even when you were uncomfortable. You were supposed to follow the plan, go to college, get married, have kids, in that order, and preferably without too much mess in between. Every step of that plan was presented as proof of success, proof that you were doing life the right way. And when you don't live life to code, people don't ask what happened to you. They ask what's wrong with you. So I learned early on that I had to perform my way back into their approval. I've had to be the good daughter, the strong mom, and the grateful survivor. I mastered the role of the girl who smiled through it, who could take anything life threw at her and still look composed enough to make people comfortable. And I was pretty damn convincing. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I said I'm fine when I was falling apart. I performed my pain in a way that didn't make anyone flinch. I learned that approval lived in the pauses between what I wanted to say and what I actually said. That love came easier when I didn't ask for much. I measured my worth in how convincing I could be on how small I could make my pain look, on how normal I could make my chaos sound. No one tells you that that kind of performance costs you. You start confusing peace with silence. You start believing that control is the same thing as safety. You start living like you're on stage, even when no one's watching. I have spent years replaying every wrong decision in my head. Every time I didn't fit the plan, every time I took the harder road, thinking it meant that I failed. But now I see it differently. I didn't do life wrong. I just refused to keep pretending. And maybe that's the most radical thing a woman can do. Stop performing long enough to see herself clearly. Because you can't heal while pretending you're already whole. And that's what I was doing, building a version of myself that looked strong enough to keep everyone else comfortable. The truth is, the so-called wrong turns were actually where I found myself. While everyone else was chasing the picture-perfect timeline, I was surviving. Healing isn't a linear path. It is a daily decision to show up when you'd rather disappear. I have spent too much time mourning the life that I was supposed to have when I should have been celebrating the one I created out of the ashes. I didn't fail. I evolved. I built something real, not the version people wanted to see, but the one that finally feels like home. When you're in survival mode, you don't recognize yourself. You're not thinking about self-care or identity or how your choices look from the outside. You're just trying to make it to tomorrow. And yet that's when people feel the most entitled to tell you who you are. This isn't you. You've changed. You're not the same person anymore. And they're right. I'm not. I'm not the version of me they built their comfort around. I'm the version that came out of the fire, stripped down to survival, doing what she had to do to stay alive. Emotionally, mentally, sometimes literally. When you're healing from trauma, people don't see the inner war. They see distance and call it coldness. They see boundaries and call it selfish. They see exhaustion and call it ungrateful. But that's what survival looks like. It's messy and misunderstood. And it's lonely because the people who loved the performance don't know what to do with the pause. I've been told this isn't you more times than I can count. What they really meant was, you're not as easy to manage anymore. And I get it, I used to miss her too. The girl who smiled through everything, who made pain look pretty. But that girl was tired, and she deserved to stop pretending. It's strange how the hardest seasons, the ones that strip you bare, are the ones that finally show you who you've been all along. Through survival, I found my true self. I used to think I lost myself somewhere in the chaos, but I didn't lose her. I buried her. Under politeness, under fear, under years of conditioning that taught me to be pleasant before I was ever allowed to be real. Survival forced me to dig her back up. Piece by piece, I started pulling off the layers of who they trained me to be. The agreeable one, the grateful one, the version that kept everyone comfortable. I stopped apologizing for being loud when I had something to say. I stopped explaining why I couldn't stay small anymore. And the more I unlearned, the more I realized that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about reclaiming my voice. Every time I choose honesty over politeness, every time I say no without a 10-minute explanation, every time I tell the truth about how I'm really doing, I'm coming back to myself. Survival gave me permission to be authentic, to stop performing strength and actually feel it, to stop chasing approval and start choosing peace. That's what life unmuted really means. It's not about being loud all the time. It's about refusing to silence the parts of you that have something to say. And for the first time, I'm not playing a part. I'm just living. On this path of self-discovery, the one I didn't choose but had to take, I've learned what it really means to live with CPTSD. CPTSD stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. It's similar to PTSD, but instead of being caused by one single event, it's born from prolonged or repeated trauma, the kind that slowly rewires your sense of safety, your trust, your self-worth. PTSD is often linked to one moment in time, something you can point to. CPTSD, though, lives in layers. It builds quietly over years of survival. My own trauma started early in my childhood. However, the main event that changed the trajectory of my life happened when I was 19 years old. I lost my first child, my daughter Cadence, when she was just 6 weeks old, from a congenital heart defect called pulmonary atresia. Actually, I always say that she died because she had a congenital heart defect, but she actually passed away from contracting sepsis while she was sick in the hospital. During my pregnancy with her, I worked as a photographer at a studio called The Picture People. Once she was born, I took a leave of absence. I stayed with Cadence at the hospital and also had a room at the Ronald McDonald House because I lived over an hour away. After she passed, I laid on the couch for about a month, and then I decided it was time to get back to life. So I went back to work, back to photographing babies while mourning my own. Everyone told me how strong I was for getting up, for moving forward. And I believed them because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to keep living. What no one tells you is that when you go back to living too fast, you're not actually living. You're performing survival. I got accustomed to carrying the weight of losing her without ever truly processing it. I learned how to smile through the ache, how to swallow the lump in my throat when a mother held her baby and said, "She's my whole world." Everyone around me was so desperate for me to be okay that I thought I had to be. I thought healing meant getting over it, leaving the pain behind, and being grateful for what I still had. 16 years later, people still think I should be over it. But you don't ever get over something like that. You learn how to live with it. For years, I was so focused on staying strong that I never allowed myself to actually grieve. I kept pushing forward because that's what we're told to do. We don't hold space for grief. We rush it. We don't sit in pain. We silence it. But that silence, it doesn't heal you. It just buries the wound deeper. And eventually it finds its way out. An anxiety and panic and exhaustion that feels bone deep. In moments where your body reacts before your mind even knows why. That's what living with CPTSD is like. Your body remembers what your brain tried to forget. So now, instead of trying to move on, I am learning to hold space. To honor what still aches. To let the grief breathe instead of locking it away. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to live, even with the echoes. The older I get, the more I realize that unprocessed grief has a way of resurfacing in the places we care about the most. For me, that's motherhood. Some days my CPTSD doesn't show up as panic or flashbacks. It shows up in the way I hover when my kids are too quiet. In the way I can't fall asleep until I've checked on them one last time, just to make sure they're still breathing. In the way my brain runs through every possible worst case scenario, because once you've lived through your worst one, you never stop bracing for it to happen again. And that's what trauma does. It keeps you scanning for danger, even when life is safe now. My kids have never known the version of me who lived before the loss. They only know the mom who loves hard, but worries harder. The one who flinches at ambulance sirens and holds her breath when the phone rings. The one who gets quiet sometimes because her body remembers something her mind isn't thinking about anymore. For a long time, I felt guilty for that. Guilty that my healing wasn't finished before they were born. Guilty that they were growing up with a mother who still gets anxious, still has hard days, still cries when she thinks of the baby who made her a mom. But the truth is, my healing is part of their story, and their love is part of mine. They've seen me break, and they've seen me rebuild. They've watched me choose gentleness over shame, patience over perfection. And maybe that's the lesson they'll carry. That strength isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about finding peace within the broken pieces. So now, when the old panic hits, I don't fight it or hide it. I take a breath. I remind myself we're safe. I look at them, their faces, their laughter, their light. And I remember that I am not living in survival mode anymore. And that means I can love them fully, even with the ghosts that live inside my body. It means I can show them that healing isn't perfect, but it's possible. I used to think that trauma made me a broken mother. But now I see that it made me the kind of mother who knows exactly how precious it is when life keeps going. The more I've learned about myself as a mother and as someone living with CPTSD, the more I've started to see how those same old patterns show up everywhere. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that being just a mom wasn't enough. Society tells us we have to be more ambitious, more accomplished, more put together. Like motherhood alone isn't a valid identity. It's just a phase we're supposed to power through on the way to something else. So I tried to be more. I tried to build an identity outside of it, something that sounded more professional, more respectable, something that proved I was still a whole person underneath the word mom. I didn't even realize how much of that came from years of being told that motherhood makes you less of a person, less focused, less driven, less credible. For a while, I believed it. I thought if I wanted to be taken seriously, I had to quiet the mom parts of me. But I've learned that being a mother doesn't make me less professional, less powerful, or less worthy of being taken seriously. It's what made me real. Motherhood isn't small. It is the most expansive, exhausting, all-filled, identity-shattering thing I have ever experienced. I have learned patience, presence, resilience, empathy, intuition, leadership, and adaptability. Skills beyond what any classroom or boardroom can teach. And yet we're told to hide it. To pretend like raising human beings doesn't translate into skill or depth or purpose. But being a mother is the root of who I am. It is the heartbeat underneath everything I do. It's where my storytelling, advocacy, and creativity come from. The instinct to notice, to nurture, to connect. That protective fire that refuses to stay silent when someone is hurting. The ability to make something meaningful out of chaos. I used to think I had to prove that I was more than a mom. But now I see that being a mother was never the limitation. It was the foundation. I am a mother, a caregiver, a nurturer, a builder, a woman who has learned to turn pain into purpose and survival into strength. It is not something I became. It's someone I have always been. And I've always been a writer. Even before I had the words to describe what I was feeling, I wrote. I was what you call a bedroom kid. You know, that kind of child who spent most of their adolescence hiding in their room, escaping through music, movies, books, just art in general. Creativity was my way out. It was my freedom when the world outside my bedroom felt too heavy or unpredictable. Coming from a family of nurses and being the eldest daughter of a single mom, I grew up fast. Caregiving was second nature to me. My goals in life were simple but big. I wanted to be a writer, a performer, a mother, and a nurse. 4 ways of saying the same thing, really. I wanted to help people feel something. I went to a small private Catholic school, and even then I knew I wanted to live a life that mattered, one that helped people, one built on compassion. My heart was set on New York City. I wanted to dance, to act, to tell stories that made people feel less alone. And when I was accepted into the American Musical and Dramatic Academy following high school, It felt like the door to that dream had finally opened. But the summer before I was supposed to start, I found out I was pregnant with my first daughter, Cadence. Losing her at 19 changed everything. It's strange how quickly dreams can collapse and rebuild into something unrecognizable. I tried again a year later, re-auditioned, and was re-accepted. At those auditions, I met my second daughter, Evangeline's biological father. He lived in Connecticut. I lived in Ohio. We stayed in touch. I took a trip to visit him. And a month before we were both set to start the semester at AMDA, I found myself pregnant again. I feel the need to mention that I was on the birth control pill when I got pregnant with both Cadence and Evangeline. You never think it'll happen until it happens to you. That's how life works sometimes. It doesn't care about your plans. When Evangeline was 5 months old, I came home to Ohio following a domestic violence situation. And not long after that, when she was a year old, I met my now husband, Kyle. The man who is my partner, my safe place, my constant. And for the first time in my life, I started to feel like I was rebuilding, like I was doing things right. I was 24 years old when our son Graham was born, my third child, and I left my job as a medical biller to stay home. It made sense financially because childcare for 2 kids cost about the same as my paycheck, but becoming a stay-at-home mom also felt like my calling. Still, even though I loved being home with my kids, there was this ache for connection, for creative expression, for a place to put all the thoughts I had been carrying. Back in 2009, when Cadence died, the internet wasn't what it is now. There were small support groups for loss, but no one was really talking about what I experienced. Baby and child loss wasn't a topic people touched, especially publicly. So when the weight of being a stay-at-home mom started to feel isolating, I turned to what I've always known, writing. I started a blog and called it Living Richardson. It's a play on words, a twist on living rich, because to me, living richly is not about money or status. It's about meaning and purpose, about finding joy in the small things, even after everything you've lost. The name also came from our wedding hashtag from rocks to riches, a nod to my maiden name, Shamrock. You get it? Shamrock to Richardson, rocks to riches. It was funny and lighthearted, but it carried truth. I've come from humble beginnings and hard stories, but I am determined to create a life that felt rich in purpose. On the blog, I wrote about what it was like to live with anxiety and grieving a child, mixed in with DIY slime and dinner recipes. Then years later, during COVID, I found TikTok, and for the first time, I found a community that understood. I started making authentic, witty videos about motherhood and marriage, the real stuff, not the Pinterest version. And that honesty resonated. My platform grew, and so did the conversations. But life has a way of testing your growth. When the lawsuit with my next-door neighbor began, the public defamation case that stretched on for years, everything I thought I had healed came roaring back to the surface. My body reacted before my brain could. The panic, the hypervigilance, the sleepless nights. They weren't new. They were familiar. It was my body remembering what it means to live in survival. Through that experience and the isolation of the pandemic, I learned how deeply my trauma still lived in me. How even when life looks stable on the outside, the inside can still be shaking. But I also learned something else, that I could survive without disappearing this time, that I could speak up, advocate, protect my kids, and still hold space for my healing. And that's what brings me here, to this podcast, Living Richardson, Life Unmuted. Every chapter of my life has been about caregiving in one way or another. as a daughter, a sister, a mother, a creator, an advocate. It is all connected. The writer in me tells the story. The caregiver in me creates the space. The mother in me keeps fighting for something better. Living Richardson started as a blog, but it's become my reminder that you can live a rich, meaningful life, even after loss. It's the reminder that I didn't have to become more than a mom to matter. I just had to become all of me. As Living Richardson started to grow, something inside me kept whispering that I was supposed to do more with it. Something that reached beyond my story and made room for others too. That's where the idea for the Silent Mother Project came from. After losing Cadence, I learned just how isolating grief can be, especially the kind that doesn't fit neatly into conversation. 16 years ago, no one was talking about infant loss, miscarriage, or maternal trauma. People didn't know what to say, so they said nothing at all. And when you're met with silence long enough, you start to believe your pain is too heavy to share. I carried that silence for years. I tucked it into conversations, behind smiles, inside, I'm fine. But silence doesn't heal you. It just buries you. So I decided to build the thing I needed back then. The Silent Mother Project started as a safe space, a community for mothers who had lost babies, pregnancies, or even just pieces of themselves. A place to speak the things we weren't supposed to say out loud. But it has grown into something bigger. It's become a home for every mother or parent or caregiver, anyone carrying invisible grief, whether that grief was loss, trauma, mental illness, or the quiet ache of never feeling enough. The Silent Mother Project isn't just about loss. It's about voice. It's about women finding the courage to speak after years of being told to stay quiet. Through events, storytelling, and shared experiences, I realized that what connected us wasn't our pain. It's our strength. And that's when I started to see it. Living Richardson and the Silent Mother Project aren't separate worlds. They're chapters of the same story. Living Richardson is my voice, the creative, messy, honest way I share my life. The Silent Mother Project is our collective voice, the proof that healing multiplies when it's shared. I thought I had to keep them apart to be professional, to be taken seriously. But I don't want to play that role anymore. I don't want to edit out the parts of me that make people feel uncomfortable. Because this is who I am. The mom, the writer, the advocate, the survivor. The woman who turns silence into a story and a story into a movement. And now, it's all one. This podcast, Living Richardson, Life Unmuted, is where they finally meet. The storytelling, the advocacy, the humor, the healing, all of it belongs here. Because life isn't meant to be separated into compartments. It's meant to be lived fully, honestly, loudly. So what can you expect from this new season? Real stories, hard truths, honest conversations. Some episodes will be just me, raw and unfiltered, talking through life, motherhood, and the lessons I've learned the hard way. Others will feature voices from the Silent Mother Project. Mothers who've walked through grief, loss, healing, and everything in between. Together, we'll talk about the things people don't usually say out loud. The loneliness, the guilt, and the resilience it takes just to keep showing up. I want this season to feel like an exhale. Like you're sitting across from a friend who finally gets it. You'll laugh, cry, maybe both. Because that's what life unmuted looks like. It's not polished. It's not performative. It's real. My hope is that by the end of each episode, you'll feel a little more seen, a little less alone, and maybe a little more willing to share your own story. If you'd like to share your story or stay connected, to catch new episodes, upcoming events, and everything happening with the Silent Mother Project, follow me on your favorite social media platform under the handle @LivingRichardson, or you can simply search my name, Samantha Richardson. You can also find more on my website, thesilentmotherproject.com. I don't have the words to thank all of you for being here, for continuing to be here through all of my messy chaos that I broadcast. It truly takes a village. Thank you for being mine. Silence never saved us. This is what happens when we stop performing and start living life unmuted.